what is the emergency?
My name is Tom Martens. I'm at 160 Panther Creek Court, and we need help.
Okay. What's going on there?
My daughter's husband, my son-in-law, got in a fight with my daughter. I intervened, and I think he's in bad shape. We need help.
In the quiet town of Wahlberg, Davidson County, North Carolina, a chilling crime unfolded on August 2nd, 2015. The life of 39-year-old Jason Corbett was brutally cut short, leaving behind a tangled web of love, betrayal, and tragedy. This is the story of the Corbett case, a tale that gripped the nation and left many questioning the true nature of the relationships between those involved. Jason Corbett, a plant manager for an international packaging company, had enlisted the help of Molly Martens as an au pair following the tragic death of his first wife, Margaret. At the time, Molly was just 24 years old, and Jason needed assistance caring for his young children, Jack, aged 3.5, and Sarah, aged 1.5. Molly, originally from Knoxville, Tennessee, was brought to Ireland to help the Corbett family. As time passed, a romantic relationship blossomed between Jason and Molly. In 2011, the family, including Jack and Sarah, relocated to Davidson County, North Carolina, as part of Jason's job. That same year, Jason and Molly tied the knot, and the Corbetts appeared to be leading a fulfilling life. Jason dedicated himself to his role at the packaging plant, while Molly took on the responsibilities of caring for the children and found joy in coaching a children's swimming team. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic family, tensions were brewing. Molly's parents, Tom and Sharon Martens, originally from Limerick, Ireland, had moved in with the Corbetts. In the early hours of August 2nd, 2015, a 911 call was made at 3 a.m. Tom, Molly's father, made the call, telling the operator that his daughter's husband, his son-in-law, had gotten into a fight with Molly. He intervened and thought that he may have killed Jason, who was bleeding all over. A paramedic team was dispatched to the scene, and Tom and Molly were prompted by the emergency dispatcher to administer CPR until they arrived. Unfortunately, there was nothing they could do to help Jason. He died from multiple blows to his head. Tom and Molly were taken to the police station in separate patrol cars, and Molly recounted the events of that fateful night. According to Molly, around 3 a.m., 8-year-old Sarah came to her and her husband's bedroom door, having nightmares. Molly went upstairs to comfort her, and when she returned, Jason was angry about being woken up. A row broke out between the couple, and Jason attacked Molly, beginning to choke her. The screaming and noise were heard by Tom, who entered their bedroom with a baseball bat in his hand. Tom confirmed Molly's account, stating that he heard Jason threatening to kill his daughter and brought the weapon for protection. Tom entered the bedroom just as Jason was strangling Molly and asked him to let her go and calm down. However, Jason refused, threatening to kill Molly. Tom hit Jason in the head several times with the bat, but Jason managed to knock Tom to the floor and took the bat away. Molly, afraid that Jason might kill Tom, grabbed a decorative garden stone from the bedside table and hit Jason over the head with it. Tom managed to get to his feet and grab the bat, continuing to hit Jason in the head until he realized that he was already dead. The police took photos of Molly and Tom for the report, but there were no signs of a struggle, no abrasions or bruises on them. This raised questions about what really happened at the Corbett house. To understand the events leading up to that fateful night, we must delve deeper into the lives of those involved. Molly Martens spent most of her life in Knoxville, Tennessee, as the only daughter in a family of 4 children. Her father, Tom, gave 30 years of his life to the FBI, and her mother was a doctor of mathematics. In his spare time, Tom coached soccer for the local children's team, and Molly practiced singing and dancing with friends. She loved to read and often appeared in her mother's book club, where she shared her opinions on what she had read. After high school, Molly decided to pursue a medical degree, enrolling at Clemson University in South Carolina in 2003. However, studying proved to be very difficult, and she soon dropped out of the university. In early 2007, Molly began dating Keith Megan, and they moved in together a couple of months later. Molly worked as a nanny and also taught children to swim, while her boyfriend worked at a local nonprofit organization. Their relationship developed quickly, but both Molly and Keith suffered from mental health issues. Molly had been diagnosed with depression and was bipolar, but medication helped her manage her condition. However, she contracted staphylococcus, and the medication for the infection seemed to block the effects of her bipolar disorder medication, throwing Molly out of her usual equilibrium. This was a very difficult period for Keith and Molly, as she suffered from migraines, insomnia, and spent a lot of time soaking in the bathtub, sometimes just crying on the floor. At one point, Molly was taking 16 pills a day and was unable to continue babysitting, staying at home instead. Keith took over, fully providing for them both, even though he wasn't earning much. The relationship became strained, and Molly's mental health issues continued to affect their lives together. After a while, she got better, and Molly kept saying that she wanted to get engaged to Keith. He took this step for her, thinking it might improve her condition, but it didn't help. Neither did her desire to have children. Molly got pregnant from Keith, but suffered an early miscarriage in September 2007. By February 2008, there was no improvement in her condition, and Molly's parents paid for her stay in the psychiatric unit at Emory Hospital in Atlanta, where she was to be helped to stabilize her condition and prescribed the correct course of medication. 4 days later, she returned to Keith, and they tried to continue living together. However, by the end of February, there was a rift in the couple's relationship, and Molly simply told Keith one night that she wanted to go somewhere in Europe and work there as a live-in nanny. She left for Ireland, and Keith never saw her again. Molly says that this babysitting job came at a very important time for her, as she was suffering from feelings of inadequacy after leaving university and didn't know who she was or who she wanted to be. She was fortunate to meet Jason, who helped her come to her senses and realize her importance in caring for his children. A few months later, Jack and Sarah started calling her mom, and living in Ireland, Molly missed her native land. After her engagement, she proposed to Jason to marry in America and live there, to which he agreed. Tracy Lynch, Jason's sister, with whom they were always very close, says that the Molly they knew in Ireland, and the same in the States, are two different people. When relatives from Ireland came to Tennessee for the ceremony, they noticed Molly's strange behavior. She tried to control everything, was often angry, and was not like those happy brides anticipating marriage. Sometimes she stayed in bed and would not talk to anyone. Jason's family began to question whether he should become part of this American family, and his best friend even told him to just leave, to get on a plane and return to his home country. However, Jason replied that he couldn't do that. He had already made a commitment. 4 years later, Molly was very close to Jason's children and even considered them her own, but her relationship with her husband was strained. Tracy says that recently, back in 2014, Jason had been planning to move back home. He wasn't happy in North Carolina and had started gaining weight. Molly was acting strangely, and he didn't like some of the things going on at home. He missed Ireland and said it would be hard for him to get out when Molly found out he wanted to leave with his children, but without her. Molly's relationship with Jason's children was a significant factor in her life. She had grown close to them and considered them her own, but her husband was hesitant to let her become their legal guardian. Jason didn't want to use his wife's citizenship to make a visa for himself, as that would give her no legal grounds to claim custody of the children if they later divorced. Molly later confessed to several of her friends about the abuse by her husband, and neighbors began to keep a closer eye on Jason. However, there was no visible corroboration of Molly's words, and she did not appear to be a victim of abusive behavior. On the contrary, Molly didn't seem afraid of Jason, and he didn't fit the image of a tyrant. He was friendly, outgoing, and generous. The Corbett's closest neighbor reported that Molly had said things that didn't fit the big picture and were most likely false. She herself admitted that she may have lied to others to make herself look good and not be ashamed of her words or actions. On August 2nd, still dressed in her pajamas after the bedroom fight, Molly answered detectives' questions and reported that Jason had abused her. She'd gone to the hospital several times, but never admitted how she got the injuries. Her husband was verbally and emotionally abusive, according to her, and sometimes sincerely apologized. It seemed like things were supposed to get better in their relationship, but the abuse continued, and each time the situation only got worse. Despite this, her love for Sarah and Jack kept her from leaving him. Molly added that she never told about her husband's abuse because the children were not her own and were not U.S. citizens. Jason could have taken them away from her several years ago. Fearing that no one would believe Jason's abuse, Molly, on the advice of her attorney, began using hidden recording devices. She says many of the recordings she collected have been destroyed or lost, but those that remain have been turned over to prosecutors. For example, on a recording titled, "Jason Comes Home Late December 2013, he finds the door locked, and rings the bell repeatedly. She opens it within 39 seconds and apologizes, but he angrily asks if she ever means to do anything. He mocks her, and multiple smacking sounds can be heard as she begins to whimper, "I hate you," before the recording cuts out. Molly says Jason had a key, but was too drunk to get the door open, and as often happened in their home, the fury would just rise and rise until whatever was going on was all her fault. 4 days after their father's death, 10-year-old Jack and 8-year-old Sarah were interviewed twice by state authorities. The children described their father's aggression, ongoing problems in their parents' marriage, alleged verbal, emotional, and physical abuse on his part, and, perhaps most importantly, they understood and recognized these problems. Sarah explained that her mom didn't want to wake her dad up, or he would get very angry and say, "Why are you waking me up?" Jack had witnessed the use of physical force by his father on 1 or 2 occasions. A few years earlier, Jason had designated Tracy as the legal guardian of his children in the event of his death. He knew Molly wouldn't give them up without a fight. Tracy immediately flew to North Carolina and petitioned for custody of the children, and Molly did the same. 16 days after Jason's death, Tracy became the guardian of Jack and Sarah, and they moved back to Ireland in January 2016. In January 2016, Tom and Molly were charged with second-degree murder. Tracy believes that Molly learned of Jason's plans to return to Ireland with the children, but without her, and a plan was devised to get rid of him. Molly had long wanted only her children, not her husband. In July 2017, Molly and Tom went on trial for the murder of Jason Corbett. The prosecution offered a very different story of what happened, which did not include a narrative of strangulation and self-defense. Prosecutors relied almost entirely on forensic evidence, which included photographs of Jason's body and gruesome signs of a struggle in the bedroom. According to the pathologist's report, Jason was struck at least 12 times in the head, with the exact number unable to be given because he was hit in the same spot over and over again. The skull showed noticeable cracks and severe bruising, comparable to injuries sustained by someone who has fallen from a great height or been in a car accident. A blood spatter expert stated that at one point in time, Jason's head was 30 or 45 centimeters off the floor, and he continued to be struck. According to prosecutors, Jason was first struck while he was still in bed, sedated. Toxicology tests confirmed that Jason's system contained a sedative prescribed in Molly's name 2 days before the tragedy. Also, Jason's $600,000 insurance policy had been changed about a year ago. Molly was now the sole beneficiary. Jurors were additionally shown photos of the defendants taken at the station on the night of August 2nd. Tom and Molly did not have a scratch on them. It was impossible to get into the fight Molly described with a man bigger, stronger, and taller than you, and not get a scratch or a bruise. Presumably, Tom and Molly were delaying the 911 call, making up their story for the police while Jason's body was cooling on the floor. This thought was made as paramedics who arrived at the Corbett home noted the low temperature of his body. It was already cold. There was no disclosure of abusive behavior on Jason's part at trial. In general, the issue of domestic violence was minimally discussed during the trial. Tom, in his testimony, claimed that Jason had a great deal of control over Molly. He noticed bruises on her body but could not understand where they came from, although he admitted that he had never seen physical aggression on Jason's part, except on that August night. Before sentencing, Molly said incidents like August 2nd happened quite regularly. The only difference is that this time, my father was in the house. In defense of his clients, the attorney pointed to a photo from the station where Molly had a red mark on her neck, confirming strangulation. 2 weeks before the incident, Jason had a standard physical exam, and the doctor claimed he had been under stress lately. He complained of uncontrollable outbursts of unreasonable anger. The autopsy found marks on Jason's left arm, indicating that he was defending himself, but not on his right arm, which he allegedly used to hold Molly by the neck. 9 days of testimony, arguments, photos from the scene of the tragedy, and the jury left to deliberate. After spending less than 5 hours in the room, they found Tom and Molly guilty. Both received sentences of 20 to 25 years in prison. The court ruled a few days after the verdicts were announced. The lawyers filed an objection to the court's decision, the main argument being judicial errors, in particular, incorrect actions of the jury. They violated the judge's instructions. Even before the verdict was announced, one of the jurors gave an interview and said to journalists that some of them had already discussed the case in private conversations, which is strictly prohibited, but the court denied the motion. In January 2019, the appeals court only allowed the defense and prosecution to present oral arguments in Molly and Tom's case. The defendants themselves were not in the courtroom. Each side had only half an hour to present their main arguments. On February 4, 2020, the North Carolina Court of Appeals reversed Tom and Molly's conviction and ordered a new trial, specifically because, among other errors in the first trial, evidence that Jason may have been violent toward Molly was excluded. A year later, the North Carolina Supreme Court upheld the appellate court's decision, despite a challenge filed by the state. It ruled that the exclusion of certain evidence at trial and the erroneous inclusion of others may have prevented Tom and Molly from presenting a meritorious defense, and their words of self-defense thus had little evidentiary basis. In turn, the jury was not fully informed about the evidence, and they were unable to fulfill their constitutional function. In all, Molly and Tom spent 44 months behind bars and were released on $200,000 bail each in April 2021. It is important to note, with so much emphasis on interviews given by two young children shortly after their father had just died and while in the custody of Molly's family, that both Jack and Sarah have since recanted the statements they made. They said that they were coached to lie about domestic abuse. They have since told the Davidson County District Attorney's Office from their residence in Ireland that Molly coerced them into making those statements, which were completely false, and that it was actually Molly who had been abusive. In November 2023, a new trial took place where the judge ordered Molly Martens and her father Thomas to prison for a minimum of 7 months after an emotional final day of sentencing hearings. The pair were let out of a North Carolina court in handcuffs on Wednesday, receiving sentences ranging from 7 to 30 months for the voluntary manslaughter of Jason Corbett. This is in addition to the 3.5 years Molly and Thomas have already served after previously being convicted of murder. What do you think about this story? Share your opinion in the comments.